Hi, I'm Rain. At my own brother's promotion ceremony, two armed guards shoved me to the ground like I was a threat. One hissed, "You don't belong here." They didn't know. I used to outrank every man in that room. But what hurt more wasn't the rifles. It was hearing my brother say nothing. Not even once did he speak up for me. So I stood there, in silence, until 6 Navy SEALs rose and saluted me. No words, just a truth they could no longer bury. Before we dive in, what would you have done in my shoes? Ever been betrayed by the people who should have had your back? Drop a comment. I read everyone. I parked 3 blocks away, even though the lot near the base auditorium was wide open. Old habit. Stay quiet, stay small. Don't take up space you're not wanted in. The summer sun bore down heavy as I walked past rows of perfectly trimmed hedges, concrete walls that still smelled faintly of salt and paint, and that crisp sense of military order, one I used to live inside. The guards waved me through the gate after scanning my name. I was on the list. I had RSVP'd. I had followed every rule. Still, their eyes flicked across my face with a kind of suspicious familiarity, like they were trying to remember where they'd seen me before, and maybe hoped not to. Inside, the auditorium buzzed in that quiet, orderly way Navy ceremonies always did. Polished shoes clicked along the polished floor. Rows of families sat with stiff backs, medals glinting from lapels. I recognized the cadence of the color guard march even before they entered. It had been years, but some things don't unstick from your bones. I wore a plain navy blue dress, nothing fancy, not flashy, but still, heads turned when I walked in, not toward me, around me. People noticed me the way they notice a stain on a white tablecloth, out of place, a reminder of something impolite. I scanned the room, found my mother sitting near the front, clutching her purse with both hands like it was the last thing tethering her to reality. Cassian stood proudly at the podium, his posture straight, the bars on his chest practically gleaming under the light. He hadn't seen me yet. Or maybe he had, and just chose not to react. It had been almost 5 years. 5 years since I left without a word. No goodbye, no family cookout, no dramatic exit. Just silence. It was cleaner that way. But I came today. For him. I stayed near the back, choosing a seat beside an elderly couple I didn't know. They didn't ask questions. That was nice. I looked at my hands as I sat, the small scars across my knuckles still faint but permanent. Years of field work did that to you, even if to the family I'd never seen real combat. To them, my time in Navy intelligence was just paperwork and screens. Cassian got the stories, the parades, the medals. I got the skeptical looks. I didn't come to make a scene. I came because once upon a time I braided his hair when he was scared. I came because I taught him how to walk again after he busted his leg in officer training. I came because I used to believe that being a sister meant showing up, even if no one clapped when you did. He never thanked me, not once. But I still brought him a gift, quietly mailed, no return address, just like I always did. The national anthem started. I stood, and then it happened. The sharp, aggressive voice cut through the air like a snapped wire. "Ma'am, step away from your seat, hands up." I froze. All eyes turned. 2 armed security guards, fully uniformed, stepped into the aisle, rifles half raised. The room went still. I turned my head slightly. One of them barked again, louder this time. "Now, get down. You're not authorized to be here." I didn't move. My name had been on the guest list. I had nothing to prove, but I also knew better than to argue with a man gripping an M4 with shaking hands. Cassian didn't move from the front of the room. My mother looked straight ahead, her jaw tight. I raised my hands slowly, deliberately, and knelt. The entire auditorium held its breath. The flag behind the podium didn't even flutter. One of the guards leaned close enough for me to smell the chemical tang of his aftershave. He muttered, almost like it gave him pleasure, "You don't belong here. You're nobody." I could have said 100 things, flashed a dozen credentials, demanded names, ranks, consequences, but I'd done that before in places where it didn't matter. Today, I said nothing. My knees pressed against the waxed tile. I looked straight ahead. That's when I heard it. 6 sets of boots moved at once from the back row. No one spoke, not even the guards. 6 men in black stood up, still and steady, each one lifting a hand in perfect unison, saluting me. I didn't have to turn around to know who they were. They had once been mine, my unit, my ghost. One had a scar I remembered cleaning in a medic tent in Afghanistan. Another used to hum Springsteen while disarming roadside bombs. They weren't dressed for ceremony. They were there as shadows, sitting in the back, unnoticed. Until now. The silence in the room shifted. It wasn't just awkward anymore, it was reverent, uneasy, the kind that says, "We got it wrong." The guard nearest me slowly lowered his weapon. The other looked at Cassian, as if silently asking what to do. Cassian stared at me. For the first time in years, he looked straight into my face, but he didn't say a word. General Halstead, the presiding officer, stepped forward. His eyebrows drew together as he took in the scene, the kneeling woman, the saluting SEALs, and the crowd frozen in confusion. No one told me to stand, but I stood anyway, not fast, not in defiance, just steady. Cassian blinked. The ceremony hadn't resumed. The flag still hung behind him, but something had already ended in that moment, something we'd both been pretending wasn't broken. I smoothed the front of my dress and adjusted my shoulders. Not one of the 6 salutes had dropped. I didn't need to be introduced, didn't need a microphone or a spotlight. I turned to leave, and just before the doors opened, a memory floated back like smoke. Years ago, after Cassian tore his shoulder during a brutal training exercise, I stayed up late folding a white handkerchief into the shape of eagle wings, something our father used to do before missions. I left it on his bed. He never said thank you. But I still came today. I didn't turn to look back. Not when the salute ended. Not when the whispers started. And not when my brother, still wearing the shine of his new rank, walked away without so much as a glance in my direction. As the room settled again, voices resumed their polite cadence, the way people pretend nothing uncomfortable just happened. My steps were measured as I followed General Halstead through a side exit. The hallway smelled like antiseptic and old dust. We walked in silence. His face was unreadable, clipped tight like an old photograph that had seen war. He held the door open to a quiet officer lounge, leather chairs, books no one touched, and the hum of air conditioning. Once inside, he didn't sit. Neither did I. He just crossed the room, opened a drawer in the mahogany cabinet, and retrieved a manila folder, sealed, thick, marked with red. He placed it on the desk between us without a word. Then finally, he spoke. "You're owed an explanation. But not from me." The words sat there like a loaded weapon. I stared at the seal for a moment, then peeled it open slowly. My hands didn't shake. Not anymore. Not after all the years I'd spent steadying them for things far worse than paper. Inside, the first page hit harder than a roundhouse to the gut. My name, my service record, reactivation status, approved, clearance, reinstated, 4 months ago, filed under Joint Ops Contingency, authorized by Cassian, my brother. I skimmed the rest. Language I knew too well, operative asset designation, silent reintegration, strategic use in case of breach, standard boilerplate, but it wasn't the words that got me. It was the fact that he'd done this 4 months ago and never said a word. I looked up, but Halstead had already turned his back to me, busying himself with some paperwork by the window, pretending he hadn't just handed me a live grenade. I closed the folder without reading further. The burn behind my ribs was slow and familiar. Betrayal doesn't come with fireworks. It's more like a slow bruise, deep and dark and invisible from the outside. "I'll see myself out," I said quietly. Halstead didn't answer. Outside, the sky was still bright but beginning to lean toward late afternoon. I didn't want to cry. So I walked. My heels clicked down the corridor and out past the flagpoles, past the guards who now wouldn't meet my eyes. By the time I reached the side parking lot, I was already pulling out my phone, scrolling through dusty contacts until I saw his name. Commander Brett Mathis. I hit call. It rang twice before his familiar drawl answered. Mathis. It's Rain. Rain? A pause. Well, where the hell have you been? I didn't bite. Quick question. Am I showing up in the system again? Another pause. Yeah, you are. Cross-referenced as contingency personnel. Looks like your clearance was pushed through again. Why? Who filed it? Hold on. I heard keys tapping. Then his voice lowered. Cassian, your brother. Of course. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Any idea why he wouldn't have told me? Mathis was quiet for a second too long. Then, maybe he thought you wouldn't say yes. I didn't respond. Rain, listen, whatever this is, if he looped you back in without telling you, that's a major breach of protocol. No, I said flatly. It's not protocol that bothers me. He understood. We both did. I ended the call without another word. The drive home was longer than it needed to be. I avoided the freeway, took the winding mountain back roads instead, letting the green blur past the window, letting the silence fill in the places where answers should have been. I thought about Cassian, about how he used to sneak into my room as a kid, barefoot, dragging a flashlight, whispering, "Read me just one more page." I always did. But then Bahrain happened. I remember that mission more clearly than I remember my own birthday most years. We were stretched thin, operating under uncertain flags. Cassian had convinced me to hand over the files for a strategic redirect. He said he had confirmation, said it would save time. It almost cost lives. Civilians, 3 of them. When it came time to answer for it, he said nothing. I took the fall, quietly. They offered me early retirement. I signed, packed my things, left the base before sunrise. He never asked me if I slept after that. Never once checked in. I pulled into the gravel driveway of my rental home in Asheville just as the sun began to dip behind the trees. The air was thick with the smell of honeysuckle and pine. I killed the engine, grabbed the folder from the passenger seat, and walked inside. I didn't turn on any lights, didn't pour a drink. I sat at the kitchen table, folder in hand, watching the dusk crawl across the wood floor. After a few minutes, I opened it again. I didn't read more than the first page. Didn't need to. Whatever was inside that folder, it wasn't about national security. It wasn't about protocol. It was about control, about guilt, about a man who couldn't live with silence. So he rewrote it in paperwork. I closed it again. Cassian wouldn't see me again that day. He probably wouldn't even look for me. But that folder? That stayed on the table. Unopened, unforgiven. And just when I thought this was about closure, a stranger showed up at my door. I didn't even turn on the porch light. The gravel beneath his boots hadn't crunched, the wind hadn't moved the trees. But there he was. 3 knocks, sharp, even, like a code only people trained to survive knew how to send. I froze. The mug in my hand stopped mid-air, the steam curling against my cheek. I hadn't locked the gun away after all these years just out of nostalgia. It was still in the drawer, clean, loaded, always within reach. My hand moved before I fully processed it. Outside, moonlight brushed against the window blinds, and in the tree line, something flickered. I thought it was an animal until I caught the faintest shimmer. Too controlled, too still. I set the tea down and moved like muscle memory. Drawer open, grip firm, chamber ready. I eased toward the door. He didn't flinch when I opened it. Tall, solid frame, not bulky, just balanced. Calm posture that screamed he'd been on the sharp end of chaos and knew exactly how to handle it. A single scar cut diagonally across his left cheekbone, clean like it had been sewn by someone who cared more about function than comfort. "You're being watched," he said simply. "Your house was flagged yesterday." My mouth went dry. "Who flagged it?" He didn't blink. "That file you got earlier wasn't the only thing activated. You were added back into the system." I tightened my grip on the doorframe. "What system?" He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper, worn like it had lived in his pocket for years. He handed it to me without comment. I unfolded it with care I didn't understand yet. The edges were frayed, the ink faded from sun or time or both, but the photo was unmistakable. 6 figures, all suited up in full sandstorm gear, dust in the air, eyes squinting behind tactical goggles. Me, him, and 4 others. Kandahar, 2012. I stared at it. This photo was destroyed. He shrugged. Or so you thought. It hit me like a sucker punch to the ribs. That mission, the one we were told to forget the minute we stepped out of the desert. It wasn't forgotten. The walls of my living room felt like they were closing in. I sank into the edge of the couch, still holding the photo. My knees didn't trust the floor anymore. Kandahar. Codename, Black Echo. Cassian had been in charge. That much was clear. But what he did that night, choosing to extract a foreign minister over protecting our forward unit, wasn't leadership. It was politics. We lost 1 man that night. Almost lost 2. I carried one out. Devon, if memory served. His arm had been torn open from shoulder to elbow. He wasn't breathing when we hit the evac line. Cassian never looked back. He just barked into the comms about optics. And after the smoke cleared, I took the fall. I remembered signing my retirement papers 2 weeks later with hands that still shook at night. The man standing in front of me now? That was Devon. Older, worn down in ways I could see in his jawline and the slight limp he hid well. But it was him. "You can stay here," he said after a moment, his voice even, almost too casual. "Or you can come with me. There's someone digging through the wrong corners of Black Echo, and they started with you." I didn't speak. He tilted his head slightly. "They didn't just reinstate you. They reactivated the entire file. Names, dates, errors. If your brother thought that speech today was the end of it, he's either naive or lying." I looked at the door again, then past it, toward the trees. And that's when I saw it. A flicker. Not big, not loud. Just enough. A tiny pulse of blue light, barely visible. A drone lens. They were watching. I stood up, grabbed the sealed folder still lying on my kitchen counter, and yanked my old go bag from the closet. I hadn't touched it in years, but I kept it packed. Habit dies slow when you've been trained to run. Devon didn't rush me. He just nodded toward the back entrance. As I passed through the threshold, I looked back once. Just once. I stared at the photo in my hand. "I should have burned this," I muttered. He didn't ask me to explain. We disappeared into the woods without a word more, and just when I thought this was about closure, a stranger showed up at my door. The sun had barely begun to nudge the horizon when we reached the safe house. Devon drove without headlights the last mile, cutting the engine just outside a collapsed stone wall. "This is it," he said, pointing through the mist toward the silhouette of a chapel. It looked like it had lost its faith a long time ago. The steeple had fallen in on itself, and the stained glass windows were shattered, their jagged remains littering the grass like forgotten prayers. I stepped carefully over broken panes shaped like angel wings. The wooden door creaked open into a world that smelled of oil, damp earth, and old sorrow. The stairs creaked under our weight as we descended into the basement. Dim light filtered through gaps in the floorboards above, casting long beams across the concrete floor. A makeshift cot leaned against one wall, flanked by stacked supply crates and old camo netting. Maps were pinned to the walls, some torn, some annotated in red marker. And in the center of it all stood a man with a revolver at his hip and a face like it hadn't known sleep in years. "Elijah Brandt," the man said, nodding once. "Chaplain, retired. I run this place." His voice was raspy, his southern drawl faint but intact. He motioned for me to sit. Then he reached into a steel locker behind him and pulled out a small metal box, its edges worn from age and handling. "He left this with me years ago. Told me to burn it if anything ever happened to him," Brandt said quietly. I didn't. He placed the box gently in front of me. I opened the lid. Inside was a black leather-bound journal, thick and heavy. I recognized the handwriting the moment I saw it, Cassian's blocky, impatient scrawl. My fingers hovered for a moment, then I flipped it open. The first few pages were dated mission logs, only they didn't match anything I remembered being filed. Each entry contradicted the official reports we'd all signed off on. Missions marked as clean were anything but. Names of civilians were noted, casualties listed, entire villages accounted for, none of which ever made it into the debriefings. Then I found it. Black Echo. There, in Cassian's own hand. No retrieval. Prioritized asset extraction. Civilian loss acceptable. My throat went dry. I remembered the girl, barely 8, running barefoot through the sand as we pulled out. Her screams. I'd looked at Cassian, waiting for the signal to go back. He didn't flinch. He just stared straight ahead and said, "They're not on the list." I slammed the journal shut, feeling my pulse in my ears. "He let them die," I whispered, for a headline. Devon stood still, arms crossed, his face unreadable. Brant nodded slowly. "That rescue op that earned him the Bronze Star? Scripted. We weren't supposed to leave survivors, but one did, and Cassian spun it." I stared at the box like it might catch fire. "And no one said anything?" Brant's mouth twisted. "The ones who tried? They're either buried or stripped of clearance. You made it out. He thought you were gone for good." I shook my head. The man I once trusted with my life had rewritten history, turned death into decoration, and I'd carried the weight of that mission in my bones, thinking I could have done more. "I should have known," I murmured. Every time I brought it up, he'd say I was remembering it wrong, that I was exhausted, that it was fog of war. "He gaslit you," Devon said. "That's a tactic. He needed you to doubt yourself so he could sleep at night." A silence fell. I sat on the edge of the cot, journal in my lap, staring at nothing. Then the old memories rushed back. Cassian as a boy, scolding me for speaking during dinner, rolling his eyes when I made sergeant before him, saying I was only useful because the Navy needed to fill diversity quotas. I used to think he was just jealous. Now I realized it had always been control. He wanted the narrative, even when it was soaked in blood. "He's running for Senate now," Devon added, voice low, using his SEAL record like a campaign slogan. I stood. "He shouldn't get away with this." Devon looked at me. "If this gets out, the blowback won't just hit him. It'll hit command. Active personnel. They'll come after you." "Let them," I said. I tucked the journal into my backpack and zipped it shut. "When's his next public appearance?" 10 days, military fundraising event, dress uniform, national anthem, the works. I slung the pack over my shoulder and gave one last look at the dusty church walls. Good. That gives me time. As we walked back toward the exit, I caught my reflection in a piece of broken stained glass, just a flicker of my face, fractured and war-torn, but steady, and I knew right then, this wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. I didn't expect the next mission briefing to come from a man with a limp and a cigarette tucked behind one ear. Devon pulled his truck into the cracked parking lot of a roadside diner outside Asheville, just as the sun began bleeding orange into the treetops. The neon sign buzzed like it hadn't slept in years, and the scent of fryer grease drifted through the air like memory. I stepped out of the truck, the gravel shifting under my boots. Devon kept the engine running, hand resting on the steering wheel. "He's inside," he said. "Back booth. He'll be wearing a cap that says, 'Born to Lose.' He's not joking." The diner's interior was all chipped formica and tired faces. A waitress glanced up, saw us, and didn't say a word, just went back to wiping down a table that didn't need wiping. In the far back, a man lifted his hand, 2 fingers raised in a silent greeting. Sergeant Boone looked like life had forgotten about him. The once broad shoulders were hunched now, spine crooked and fused with the kind of pain that makes a man mean. His cap was torn at the rim, and one leg stuck out stiffly from under the table, bound in a faded brace. He didn't smile when I slid into the booth. He nodded toward the sugar dispenser. "Between the pink and blue packets, don't open it in here." I looked down and found the flash drive tucked between them like a condiment no one ordered. I glanced at him, waiting. "You were always the smart one," Boone muttered. He hated that. "Cassian?" My voice didn't shake, but something in my chest shifted. Boone didn't answer. He took a sip of his coffee, black and bitter, and muttered, "Don't come back." Outside, Devin had already shut off the engine. He leaned forward as I climbed in, eyeing the small drive in my hand. "Let's do this." We parked on a quiet hill, overlooking the distant glow of the town. I plugged the drive into his old laptop, balanced across my knees, the video loaded with a stutter. Grainy drone footage, Southeast Syria, timestamp, black echo. Cassian's voice came through first. Sharp, clipped. "We need a better angle. Shift the drone, get that overhead, tight on the compound." The feed showed the target, a low structure 3/10 beside it. Civilians moved in and out, children among them. I heard my own voice on the comms. "Cassian, we've got heat signatures in Sector B. Those are non-combatants. I repeat, civilians in the blast radius." There was a pause. Then his voice, cold as steel, "Cut her feed." The screen snapped to black. Another cut, this time from a second drone. A plume of fire, dust, screaming garbled over the comms. Then, silence. I stared at the screen, unable to breathe. He silenced me, not because I was wrong, but because I was inconvenient. The laptop sat between us like a loaded weapon. Devin exhaled slowly. This is it. This is what buries him. My fingers curled into fists. He always said I was too emotional to lead, said hesitation costs lives. Devin glanced at me, his voice low. But he knew. He knew they were there. I nodded, and he sent the missile anyway. A memory surfaced, me and Cassian, side by side in a training pit 20 years ago. He knocked me flat on my back and said, "You either play the game or get played. Soft doesn't survive." I didn't say anything then. I just got back up, like I always did. Now, I sat in that truck with proof in my hand that the boy I once followed into the fire had become a man who burned the innocent for applause. I closed the laptop, let the weight of it settle in my lap. Devin stayed quiet. The wind picked up, rustling through the trees. The diner's neon buzz echoed faintly in the distance. I reached for the glove box and pulled out a cloth-wrapped bundle, my sidearm, disassembled, oiled, waiting. I unwrapped it like a ritual. Piece by piece I fit it together. Slide, lock, barrel, magazine, click. Devin didn't stop me. He just asked, "You sure you're ready for this?" I looked out the windshield, not at the road, but at the world beyond it. I was ready to fade out, to let it all go, but he made sure the past wouldn't stay buried. I loaded the last round, then set the weapon beside me. "There's a press dinner next week in D.C., Devin said. "He'll be there. He's announcing. Cameras, flags, speeches." I turned to him. "Then it's time they learn," I said. "Who saluted whom?" I didn't wait for Devin's nod or the nervous glance he shot toward the Capitol skyline. My heels struck the pavement with a steady rhythm as I stepped into the Grand Hotel, each click a decision. Past the revolving doors and velvet ropes, I moved through the lobby with the kind of purposeful stillness you learn in places where noise gets people killed. The elevator mirrors caught my reflection. Tight bun, dress blues pressed so sharp they could cut, the medals I never asked for glinting under chandelier light. No invitation, no RSVP. But the uniform spoke louder than any embossed envelope ever could. The ballroom doors opened like theater curtains, gold trim, live quartet, a sea of black ties and polished insignias. There was a hush as I walked in, just long enough for whispers to bloom. A few men straightened, others averted their eyes. A woman near the dessert table murmured, "Is that her?" I didn't acknowledge them. I scanned the crowd. There he was, Cassian. On stage, bathed in soft amber light, laughing beside a senator with a jawline carved by public approval. His smile dimmed when he spotted me, eyes narrowing just slightly before he pasted on that press-perfect grin. the same one he wore in the military recruitment ads, the same one Mom used to frame on the mantel. He raised his glass toward me like we were siblings again, like the past didn't exist. I didn't blink. I walked straight past him. Devin caught up near the far corner of the room, whispering low, "He saw you. He's nervous." "Good," I said, not slowing. We circled the room, never drawing too close to center. I kept to the shadows like old times, observation post, not attack. Wait for the opening. Breathe. Watch. Then the shift started. Phones buzzed, then pinged. One man at the bar tilted his screen so wide I caught my name in bold. "Is this her?" someone whispered nearby. My own phone chimed. I glanced down. Disgraced ex-SEAL sister crashes veteran gala in delusional stunt. Below it, a thread of tweets snowballed. Mentally unstable. Fired for insubordination. Obsessive fixation on her brother's success. Dangerous. Photos of me from training days, a few with red circles around my eyes like I was a criminal from a tabloid story. Devin swore under his breath beside me, but I just stared. So this was his move. Silence hadn't been enough. He needed to smear me until no one listened. I slipped out the side doors without a word. The air outside bit at my cheeks. The hotel terrace was empty, save for a couple of potted trees and a thin stream of jazz echoing from inside. I leaned against the balustrade, staring across the city lights. This city had eaten too many people alive to count, but I'd walked through darker things. Devin joined me a few seconds later, phone still in hand. "It's bad. He planted it hours ago. Hashtags trending. It's all over." I nodded slowly. "He's using my silence to bury me alive. He thinks you won't fight back." I pulled my phone out again, not to scroll, just to open the file. The footage from the flash drive sat there like a loaded gun. My voice in the video echoed faintly as I played it again. "There are civilians in that sector. Cassian, I can see. Cut her feed." Then static. And screams. I'd kept this truth buried because I didn't want to set the world on fire. But fire had already started. It was burning my name in headlines, in whispers, in dinner conversations I wasn't invited to. "I'm done hiding," I said quietly. I selected 4 encrypted contacts, 2 former commanders I still trusted, 1 investigative journalist, and 1 advocacy lawyer. The message was short. If anything happens to me, release this. No edits, no commentary. I hit send. Then I slipped the phone into my jacket pocket and straightened my shoulders. I turned back toward the ballroom, my stride steady. Inside, the room was louder now. Laughter, clinks of champagne glasses, the beginning of a speech. But I didn't head for my seat. I headed for the mic. So, I stood at the edge of the ballroom and said, "Excuse me, before you toast, you should hear this." For a breath, nobody moved. You could have heard a cufflink drop. Forks froze midair. A senator near the stage looked around like he missed a line cue. Cassian's back was to me, but I saw his spine stiffen before he turned, slowly, that polished expression sliding off his face like old paint. He mouthed something I didn't need to read lips to understand. "What the hell are you doing?" But I didn't flinch. My voice stayed even. "I was told I don't belong here, that I'm unstable, unfit, forgotten. But I served. I bled, and I remember." I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the small USB. Devin handed me his laptop. He'd prepped it just in case, and I walked to the AV table at the side of the stage. The technician looked unsure. "Ma'am, this isn't—" "It's important. Just play it." The screen behind the podium, which moments earlier showed a slow loop of Cassian posing with generals and celebrities, flickered, and then the footage began. Helmet cam, grainy, night vision green. SEAL Team Op in Kandahar. My breath caught, not from nerves, but memory. We were all there, breaching, sweeping, clearing. And then the voice, panicked, urgent. "We've got Harris down. He's hit bad." The chopper arrived. Dust swirled. Cassian waved toward the pilot, yelling over the rotor wash. But what showed next quieted the room to near silence. Cassian, standing, unwounded, turning away. Harris lying in the dust, bleeding, screaming, "Cassian, don't leave me!" Then, darkness. The clip faded to black and came back, this time to a sunny stage at a Medal of Honor ceremony. Cassian, in his dress uniform, smiling as he accepted the medal. A firm handshake, the kind of footage every news outlet had replayed 100 times. A man in the back of the room whispered hoarsely, "That's Harris. He didn't make it." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Chairs creaked. Someone coughed. Cassian stepped forward, his voice rising. "That footage is fake. It's been doctored. It's deep-fake garbage. She's unstable. You all saw the stories." I stayed where I was, centered, breathing steady. "That video has been verified twice by independent forensic analysts. The timestamp matches mission logs. I was there, and so was Devin." Devin stood beside me, voice lower but resolute. "I was the one who carried the other half of Harris's body." The gasp that followed wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, guttural, real. Cassian's mask cracked just for a second. Then he raised his voice again, too loud for a room so hushed. "She's lying. She's obsessed, jealous, trying to destroy a decorated officer in front of guests who actually matter." A few guests shifted in their chairs. One of the generals pressed his fingers together in thought. A senator gathered her purse and slipped out the side door. Another person stood, a retired master sergeant I'd seen before but never met. He didn't say much, just looked at Cassian and said, "We don't leave our own. Not like that." Cassian's expression tightened. He looked around, maybe hoping for support. There was none. Just quiet. He grabbed his phone and stormed toward the exit, passing close enough to hiss in my ear, "You'll regret this, Rain." I didn't look at him. I already have. He shoved the doors open with both hands. Cameras near the press table clicked rapidly. Reporters who'd barely glanced my way now stood with their recorders raised. Devin touched my elbow lightly, not as a prompt, but solidarity. The ballroom hadn't gone back to eating or laughing. They wouldn't, not tonight. Then my phone vibrated. A single message from an unknown number. "Pull that footage, or next time, it won't be just your reputation we come for." I read it twice, then locked the screen. Quietly, I whispered under my breath, "Bring it." The text still lingered on my phone screen, its threat sharp and quiet. I slid the device into my coat pocket as Devin leaned in and whispered, "They're pulling Cassian into a press room. He's about to make a move." We didn't need to say more. I nodded, and together we stepped out of the ballroom. The hallway outside buzzed with whispers and flashes of cell cameras. The air smelled like cold champagne and old tension. Devin guided me down a side corridor where I heard Cassian's voice coming from a velvet-draped door, left slightly ajar. There were already a dozen reporters gathered, their badges swinging from lanyards as they adjusted tripods and fumbled with notebooks. His tone was smooth, too smooth, like someone who'd practiced in a mirror for years. "Look," he said, flashing that smile people used to trust. "She's been unstable for a long time. PTSD, paranoia. She was removed from active duty for a reason." He placed a manila envelope on the podium with dramatic flair. "This is her medical file, redacted for your convenience. I suggest you read the part about untreated combat delusions." "Dios," some of the reporters murmured. A few cameras pointed straight at the envelope. I didn't wait to be invited in. I stepped forward, past the knot of journalists. One of them turned, startled. Another gasped, then turned his lens toward me. Devin followed silently behind, expression unreadable. Cassian's mouth twitched. "Rain, this isn't your show?" I cut in calmly, facing the press. "Forgive me, but I think it's time I clarified a few things." I stepped beside the podium and looked out at the sea of eyes. I thought staying quiet would keep things clean. I believed silence might shield others. But all it did was give men like him more room to lie. Devin handed me a folder. I flipped it open. "This is the original after-action report from Operation Delta Rain. It's been authenticated, signed by then-Commander Markham, among others. And this," I lifted a second document, "is the mission roster. The real one. Cassian's name doesn't appear anywhere near Kandahar that week. Cassian laughed. Too loud, too quick. That's not official. That's fabricated. She's cobbled this together in a moment of desperation. Then maybe you should stay and watch what comes next, I said. Just then, the double doors at the back of the room opened. 6 men walked in. Not in tuxedos like the rest of the gala crowd. They wore dress uniforms. Medals glittered across their chests, but it was the way they moved, in formation, silent and solemn, that made every camera turn toward them. The man in the center stepped forward. His voice was clear and unwavering. "Lieutenant Commander Rain Thorne," he said, "your team is present and accounted for." As one, all 6 of them raised their hands in salute. I didn't move. I couldn't. My breath caught somewhere between my ribs and my throat. The flash of cameras was a blur. One of the reporters gasped. A woman near the wall dropped her pen. "Cassian!" He didn't speak. His face had drained of every ounce of color. He stood like a man suddenly made of stone. The last to enter the room was General Markham, older now, but still walking with the steadiness of command. He stepped to the podium, his gaze sweeping across the room before resting on me. "She led that mission," he said, his voice gravel-thick, "and she saved 3 lives under fire. One of them was my son." He looked squarely at Cassian. "You accepted a medal that wasn't yours. You told a story that nearly cost more lives down the line." Cassian shook his head, barely audible. "You're twisting this." General Markham didn't waver. "Son, the only thing that's twisted here is the lie you built your career on." Then he turned to me, his voice softening. "Rain, you've stayed quiet too long." I felt the words settle somewhere deep. He was right. The press room burst into questions all at once, reporters pushing forward, mics raised. Someone called out, "Why now, Rain? Why break your silence tonight?" I looked at the men still standing in salute. At Devon, whose quiet support had never wavered. At General Markham, whose eyes held the weight of both gratitude and regret. And I finally answered, because no one saluted me. Until tonight. The echo of those salutes still rang in my chest, not my ears. The ballroom had emptied, the flash of cameras had faded, and so had the adrenaline. But what remained was something quiet and permanent. Weeks passed like falling leaves, slowly, softly. I didn't chase headlines or try to reclaim lost years. I just let the dust settle, inside and out. One late morning in November, with the air crisp and golden, Devon drove us out to a modest community center near Arlington. There wasn't a banner, no fanfare, just a hand-painted sign near the door, Veterans Day Gathering. Chairs were scattered beneath a line of maple trees still clinging to their last flame-colored leaves. A handful of older veterans stood near a table covered in coffee cups and powdered donuts. A bugler, maybe in his 70s, practiced a quiet note on the side. No one here knew about Cassian. No one brought a camera. That somehow made this day matter more than all the others combined. I wore the uniform again, not because anyone told me to, but because this time it was mine to wear. I wasn't performing. I wasn't proving anything. I was just returning. Devon squeezed my hand as we approached a small group near the podium. General Markham stood there, straight as a flagpole, though age tugged gently at his spine. His hands held a small velvet box. He didn't speak into a mic, no speech, no pomp, just stepped forward, opened the box, and whispered so only I could hear, "You earned this in silence. You'll wear it the same way." Inside was the Distinguished Service Cross, nestled next to a folded American flag. I took it with both hands. My eyes didn't water. My heart did. He placed a hand on my shoulder, nodded once, then stepped back. No applause followed, only the soft whistle of the trees. Later, Devon and I sat on a wooden bench just outside the circle of chairs. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "I met with JAG," he said. "Everything's been restored. Your file, your status, your rank." He laid 2 ID cards on my lap, one worn and bent, the other fresh and stiff, my name on both, my picture, my service number. "You were never a ghost, Rain. They just tried to make you one." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak yet. Some parts of healing come in silence. Not long after, a little girl who'd been standing near the back walked hesitantly toward me. Maybe 7, maybe 8. Her jacket sleeves covered her hands. "Ma'am?" she asked quietly, not meeting my eyes. "Why did those soldiers salute you the other night on TV?" I smiled and crouched down to her level, ignoring the slight pull in my knees. From the inside of my jacket, I drew out a small cloth square. It was faded, a little torn at the edges. "This was my mission patch," I said, from a time most people forgot. But I didn't. She reached out slowly and I placed it in her hand. "They saluted the truth, sweetheart," I said, "and now I'm passing it on." She blinked up at me like she wasn't sure if she should smile. I winked at her. "You'll know what to do with it when the time comes." Behind her, a few more veterans were heading inside, waving at Devon. A new batch of coffee had arrived. As I stood, a man approached with a folder tucked under his arm. I didn't recognize him, but the way he carried himself was familiar, measured, heavy, dignified. "I came from the disciplinary review board," he said. "Cassian signed his discharge papers last week." I didn't say anything. "He won't serve again. His father made sure of it." Still, I didn't answer. "I thought you might want to be notified in person." I met his eyes and shook my head. "I already forgave him," I said, "but I'll never forget what I survived." He nodded. "Understood." That evening, as the sun slipped behind the tree line, I visited a nearby support center. They'd just finished repainting the front wall. The new sign read, "Project Salute." Inside, someone had pinned a photo in the corner of the reception room. It was small, unframed, just me, smiling faintly, a little tired, in uniform. No plaque, no caption, but someone had left a post-it below it. She didn't speak loud, but we listened. I stood there a moment, just breathing it in. The quiet, the space, the weight of it all, not as a burden, but as something earned. I had my name back, my truth, and something more powerful than revenge, legacy. Have you ever stayed silent to keep the peace, until it nearly broke you? Would you have forgiven them, or walked away like I did? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone.